Welcome to the Sharperlight Quick Start Guide. It uses our sample accounting demo database and data model for the demonstration. Using practical examples and a step-by-step approach, this guide will explain how new users can use Sharperlight to query and report from an operational database. This presentation will take about 45 minutes to run if you just want to watch the content, and do not pause or replay the exercises. There is at the beginning a short 2-minute introduction to Sharperlight and a conceptual overview of how Sharperlight hangs together. You can easily fast forward through the introduction by using the forward button on the play bar. This slide has 7 core values that Sharperlight brings to an organization. When you look at the demonstration, you might reflect on these and how easy it is to use. The same query builder is used throughout. The sample accounting data model presents a data structure that conceals the complexity of the database. Each query is refreshed directly from the accounting database. The Sharperlight Excel add-in leverages the power of Microsoft Excel, but we are not reliant on Excel because we can just as easily publish content to our web interface. In simple terms, Sharperlight has a query engine and a web service that client presentation layers connect to. There is a common query language, and all the client interfaces use a data model to understand and interact with operational systems. Reusability of queries is an important benefit. A query in Microsoft Excel can be published to the web as a HTML table or a chart, and the same content can then be reused in a dashboard page. The one Sharperlight installation can access multiple systems and provide a common reporting layer. The sample accounting demo database and data model that are used in this demonstration can be downloaded from the Sharperlight Resources website. They are all packaged together in a zip file along with a PDF document that mirrors this recorded demonstration, and it has additional running notes. To start, we open Microsoft Excel and select the Sharperlight Excel add-in menu. Start with a new blank workbook, select cell D8 on sheet 1 and click on the table icon from the Sharperlight ribbon. We have been set up for single sign-on Windows authentication in Sharperlight, so a small Sharperlight dialog with a spinning dial will appear and then the query builder will be opened into view. If we had been using a native Sharperlight login, then we would have been challenged for a valid username and a password before the query builder would have opened. What we see in the query builder will depend on whether Sharperlight has been used on this computer before and our user access. Chances are that it will display a few main filters, but nothing in the selection or output panes. With the query builder open, we are going to set the query mode, product, company ID, and table. To set the mode, there is a lookup button with a single dot positioned to the right of the mode description. Select the lookup button and the query mode dialog will appear. There are 5 modes with a short explanation and a visual representation of each when they are selected. For our purposes, we're going to focus on the summary report. So select it if it isn't already enabled and use the OK to close the dialog. We use the lookup button on the products filter and change the source product to sample accounting data if it isn't already set. Depending on our Sharperlight configuration, we might have several available products, and it is even possible to have connections to several different services that are hosting the same or different data models. The company ID filter has a lookup that shows all the available company codes that have been defined in the accounting database. Double-clicking on the MIT company record in the lookup dialog will copy the code into the value selection, and this value will be carried forward into the filter pane. We could have multi-selected the companies, and this would allow us to query multiple companies at the same time. This will be examined later. The tables filter defines the query object that will be accessed and extracted from during the query process. The tables lookup dialog is our first real view of the navigation and selection structure defined in the sample accounting data model. Using folders and logical table groupings, the core query objects are accessible and can be individually selected. For our purposes, we select the journal line and use the OK button to load this table into the query builder. The selection list will load with all the available fields and relationships that relate to this table, and mandatory filters will appear in the filter pane. There are mandatory filters for the period number and the account ID. The period number has a special period lookup that is designed for systems that have an accounting period concept. Rather than using the period lookup, we just manually type 2014-001 into the from value for the period number and then enter 2014-012 into the to value. For the account ID filter, we use the lookup button to display the account ID lookup. Notice that the lookup is displaying both the account number, the account name, and the account type. Scroll down the available account IDs, and when you see 4101 revenues from solar panels, we double click on that row and it'll copy the 4101 account ID into the from value. Then we scroll down to the 6060 account ID and then double click on the 6060 inventory adjustments. This will copy the account number into the to value. Then we use the OK button to close the lookup dialog and transfer these selections back into the filter row. With the journal line table selected and the filter set, we now select some fields from the selection list to become query outputs. There are several ways to add fields to the output pane. A field can be double-clicked in the selection pane and that will copy it into the outputs, or a field can be dragged from the selection to the outputs. There is even a right-hand click menu that can be used to add fields individually or output all fields at once. For our query, we want to output the account ID, account name, account type, and the system amount. All these fields, except for the account type, are visible in the immediate field list. The account type is in the account join folder. We click on the plus symbol next to the folder name and it will expand the related account table. We use drag and drop to output the account type field and drop it after the account name. Before extracting the query into Microsoft Excel, let us sanity check what it is returning. We use the preview button in the bottom left-hand corner of the query builder to quickly review the results. So we have the account ID, account name, account type, and the calculated sum of the system amount. Remember, this is for the accounting period 2014-001 to 2014-012, and we started with a summary report. So the standard behavior of a summary report is to sum all the amount fields based on the available filters and output columns. For our example, we don't need to output the account type, but we will add another filter to restrict the query to just the production department. We remove the account type field from the outputs pane by selecting the field and using the right-hand click menu. We could have used the delete key or just drag the field back into the selection pane. Then we scroll down the selection list until we see the journal analysis dimensions and then drag the department field into the filter pane. We use the lookup for the department filter and select the production code 200 for both the from and the to value. We use the preview tab to confirm that the revenue accounts are no longer in the result and the account type has been removed. Then we click on the OK button in the query builder and a table formula will be generated in cell D8. We started in cell D8 and the Sharperlight formulas are always created in the cell that was selected just prior to opening the query builder. Just below the table formula, there will be an Excel table which contains the same information that was returned in the preview tab. The table columns are probably a little narrow and do not display the full account name. To widen this column, you just drag the column wider or double click on the right-hand side of the column row header. If we select D8 and use the F2 function key to access the cell formula, we will see a formula that starts with MD table, and this is the table formula. Very rarely would you ever edit the formula directly, because by double clicking on the formula, it'll open the query builder and redisplay the stored query template. Double-click on the table formula in cell D8 and it'll open the query builder. We can also open the query builder by double-clicking anywhere on the table and it'll display a Sharperlight table menu with an Edit Query option. If you're wondering where the query template is stored, it is hidden away in a very hidden worksheet. So if we give someone else the workbook, then they have both the worksheet layout and the underlying queries all wrapped together in the same workbook. Double-clicking on any of the rows in our sample table will display the table menu. From the table menu, we can drill into the row details. Select the drill down summary menu item and it will then automate the loading of the drill down dialog. The left-hand pane is the selection list and the right-hand pane is a list of all the fields for slicing the row. We're going to keep it simple, so we'll just output the period number. Notice that the system amount has already been added to the outputs. After selecting the period number, we close the drill down dialog using the OK button, and this will query the selection and load it into Explorer. Explorer is the visualization tool for drilling into queries, and it can display numerous drills in their own tabs. We can see that the balance for the 5102 account has been separated into a value for each period with a grand total at the bottom. Each drill in Explorer can then be analysed further by doing another drill down on the available rows. We will click on the 2014-001 period row and select Drill Detail from the Explorer menu. The drill down dialog for a detailed drill looks the same as the summary dialog, and the only difference is that the extracted information will not be summarised. It will return every row in the underlying database into Explorer. Double-click on the journal date, reference, narration, and then use the OK button to action the drill. We will now have two tabs in Explorer, the original drill from Microsoft Excel and the detailed drill down from the summary tab. With a detailed drill there might be hundreds of rows, but there is a quick method for grouping the rows and creating subtotals. The column headings can be dragged into the grouping bar, that is just above the drill data. We have finished with Explorer and it can be closed using the Close button or clicking on the Close icon in the top right hand corner. Closing Explorer should take us straight back to our Sheet 1 worksheet. To make our table formula easier to filter and refresh, we are going to reference its filters to the worksheet. Let's start with some filter values in Sheet 1. So in cell B3, enter 2014-001, and in cell B4, enter 2014-010. To add these cell references, double-click on the table formula in D8. Select the From value of 2014-001 in the period number filter, and the entire input box should become shaded. Then double-click on cell B3 in the worksheet. It will have turned the fixed 2014-001 value to a cell reference of B3. Then we select the to value of 2014-012 and this time double click on cell B4 and it will reference B4 in the to value input box. Close the query builder using the OK button and the table formula will be updated with the two cell references for the period. Cell referencing is standard functionality in Microsoft Excel, and you can see the dependency between formulas and input cells by selecting a formula and using the F2 function key to highlight the dependencies. If we were to change the period value in cell B4 to say 2014-006, the table will be refreshed because it is now querying a different period range. To extend this concept of cell referencing, we're going to now reference the company ID to a cell. In cell B2, input the company ID MIT. We open the query builder, we select the company ID from value, and again it will shade the input box. Then we double click on cell B2 and the cell reference B2 will be copied into the from value box. If we change the company ID in cell B2 to MITS, the table formula will return nothing because it is hard-coded to an account range that is only used in the MIT sample company. We don't have to remember all the coding structures. There is an easy way of seeing the filter values. Just double-click on the cell reference of a filter and Sharperlight will display the relevant lookup dialog. This is called an automatic lookup, and the selected value in the lookup dialog will be written back to the originating cell. As a general rule, from and to filters that reference the same cell can use multi-select in the lookup dialog, and this will return multiple filter values in the same filter cell. For example, if you wanted to consolidate multiple companies together, you could select multiple rows in the company ID lookup dialog using the Control or Shift keys. The company ID in the sample accounting data model is what we call a superfield, which means it has some special behaviors controlled by the Sharperlight query engine. One of these behaviors is that it'll take the comma delimited string of companies and generate a query that unions together the tables from each separate company. It is effectively doing a consolidation across companies on the fly. Using the table formula in sheet 1, we open the query builder by double-clicking on the anchor formula. Then right-hand click on any of the output fields and select the sorting menu. This will open the output attributes dialog and take us straight to the sorting and grouping tab. To add a sort field, either double-click on the unsorted fields, and this will add the field into the sorted pane, or use the movement arrows to transfer a field from unsorted to sorted. The default sort order is ascending, but this can be changed to descending by double-clicking on the field in the sorted pane. We can have multiple fields being sorted, and the sort sequence can be changed by moving the fields up or down in the sort pane. To sort by account name, double-click on this field in the unsorted pane and it will be transferred into the sorted pane. Double-click on the account name and it will change the sort order from ascending to descending. You will notice that the graphic to the left of the field description will change from an arrow pointing down to an arrow pointing up. Close the Output Attributes dialog using the OK button, and the account name in the Outputs pane will now have the label Sort 1 Descending in its attributes. Accept this change and rerun the query by using the OK button to close the query builder. The resulting table in Excel will have the account names sorted in reverse alphabetical order, and the account IDs will be jumbled because they are no longer in order. To remove the sort order, just reopen the query template, navigate back to the Sorting and Grouping tab, and remove the account name from the sorted pane using the movement button with the left arrow. Next, we're going to look at output expressions. Using our table formula, open the query into the query builder and right-hand click on the Outputs pane. We use the Add Expression menu item and it will open the Output Attributes dialog and focus on the Expression tab. Expand the current row folder in the Functions pane and double-click on the System Amount field. This will copy the amount name reference into the Expression pane. To do a simple calculation, we can multiply the amount by a fixed factor by adding star 1.25 after the amount name. Select the OK button to accept this formula. We will now have a new output expression field in the output pane. To see the calculation in practice, use the preview in the query builder and it will extract the query and apply the expression calculation. We return to the query tab And before we re-extract this table formula into Microsoft Excel, we want to change the output field description of the expression. Right-hand click on the expression field and use the Change Description menu item to rename the output description of the field to Amount by Factor. Any of the fields in the output pane can be renamed in exactly the same way. We are going to add another amount column to our existing table formula, but this new column will only return the balance for the current month. Open the table formula into the Query Builder and drag the System Amount field from the selection list into the output pane. We now have two amount fields in the output. Use the right-hand click menu in the output pane and select Change Description to rename the original amount field to Year to Date. Change the second amount field to Current Month. To apply a period filter to the current month, we're going to need another filter for the current period number. We don't want to change the existing period number filter because we still need it to restrict the rows and amount balances for the year to date. Select the period number field from the selection pane and drag it into the filter pane. Cell reference this new period filter to B4 for both the from and to values. Right-hand click on the current month output field and select the first menu item called Options. This will open the Output Attributes dialog and display the Functions tab. On the right-hand side of the Functions tab, there is a pick list to apply filters to the currently selected output column. Notice that it doesn't refer to the field descriptions, it uses the defined name of a filter. Filter names are auto-generated and are visible in the far right-hand side of the filter pane. They are always prefixed with an @ symbol. To filter the current month field using the new period filter that references cell B4, we pick the filter name that corresponds with that row. To confirm that the current month column is being filtered to a specific month, we use the Preview tab and sanity check that the amount in the current month column is less than the year to date column. If the result looks reasonable, then we select the OK button and return the result set into Excel. It is very likely that renaming the original amount field to year to date will distort the resulting table columns. Sharperlight uses the Excel table object to contain and display the results from a table formula. However, Excel tables can sometimes get confused with column reordering and column name changes. If the columns returned by a table formula are distorted in order or the columns are duplicated, the easiest way to reset the table is to select all the column headings in a table and then use the Delete Table Columns function from the right-hand click menu. This will delete all the columns and effectively remove the table, but the table formula will identify that the table is missing and recreate the table with the correct columns. Distortions in the placement of the table columns is one of the reasons why the preview pane can be very useful, because it can reduce the double handling of output columns and output order. This table behavior also illustrates the light coupling between the Sharperlight add-in and Microsoft Excel. We don't attempt to force Excel to work in a particular way. We work with Excel, and this approach means our add-in is much simpler and works the same way with all supported versions of Microsoft Excel. Next, we are going to create another report similar to the existing table formula, but it'll use value formulas. Using the same workbook where we created the table formula, copy the account ID and account name columns from our table formula and paste special the values into cell D9 on sheet 3. We use paste special because the default paste will create another table in sheet 3, and we don't need a table, just the account details. Next, we'll add the default worksheet filters. In cell B2, enter MIT for the company ID, and in cell B3, enter period number 2014-006. We add a company ID filter into cell B2 and the current reporting period into B3. In cell H4, we're going to add an Excel formula to represent the starting period of the financial year. Enter the formula into H4, and this is a simple method of defining the year-to-date start period. To make it self-explanatory, we enter the label current month into cell G7 and year-to-date into H7. To create the value formula, select cell G10 and click on the value formula icon on the Sharperlight ribbon. This will open the query builder, but it will now default to aggregation in the query mode. Similar to what we did with the table formula, we need to set the product, company ID and table if they're not already configured. Set the product to sample accounting data, company ID to MIT, and the journal line table. With the company ID filter cell reference to B2, also reference the period number to B3 and the account ID to D10. After selecting the filter cell references, you'll notice the company ID is set to $B$2. The period becomes $B$3, whilst account ID is set to $D10. The account ID has been automatically resolved to be absolute on the column and relative on the row, whilst the company ID and period are both absolute on the row and column. There is fuzzy logic in the cell selection where it attempts to create the optimum cell reference for copying and pasting the formulas. After copying the system amount into the outputs pane, we close the query builder by using the OK button, and it will create an MD value formula in cell G10. We use the F2 key to show the dependencies between the formula in G10 and the cell referenced filters. If we have the absolute and relative references set correctly, then we can copy the same value formula down the column to the bottom of the available account numbers. Automatic recalculation will then refresh each formula once the paste has been completed. So every value formula in row G has exactly the same structure, but is using a different account ID because the cell referenced filter for the account is relative to each row. In this way, the same structural formula can be reused thousands of times, and it's just a matter of copying and pasting the formula. In column H, we want the year-to-date balance for these accounts. So select cell H10 and use the value formula icon on the ribbon to open the query builder for a new formula. This year-to-date query will have the same structure to the existing current month query, but the from value for the period number filter we'll use the formula in cell H4 to resolve the starting period. Use the OK button in the query builder to deploy the value formula into cell H10. If we have our absolute and relative references set correctly, then we should be able to copy the formula in cell H10 down to the bottom of the available account numbers. Value formulas can also be drilled into. To drill down on a value formula, select the relevant cell formula and click on the drill down icon on the Sharperlight ribbon. This will pop up a drill down selection menu. The drill down opens an outputs dialog, and after making a field selection, the Explorer interface is loaded into view. Next, we're going to look at how the Query Manager can be used to manage the queries in a workbook. Use the Manager icon on the Sharperlight ribbon to open the Query Manager. The 3 queries we have created in the workbook are represented as query templates. What you will notice immediately is that they are all called journal line. This could be quite confusing if someone else was to look at the workbook. So we're going to rename these query templates. The first query in the tree is our table formula query. And if you right-hand click on the query name, it gives you the option to rename the description. We are going to change the query name of the summary report query to accounts by month and year to date. Then we rename the first aggregation query to say current month. And the second aggregation query is renamed to year to date. Query templates can be stored in a workbook waiting to be deployed as a formula. If they are used in formulas, then the rename will do a global find and replace to remap the existing formulas to use the new query name. You might have noticed that each query template has an icon that reflects the query mode defined in the underlying query. You can also see the cell referenced filters in a parameters folder. Using the parameters, we can differentiate between the current month query and the year-to-date query because the latter will have 2 cell references for the period number. Microsoft Excel is a powerful analysis tool, but it can be cumbersome, especially when sharing workbooks with a large audience. To deliver reporting content to the masses, Sharperlight uses its web service to render queries stored in Publisher. We could just open Publisher and create a query from scratch, but Publisher is often the destination of queries that have been prototyped in Excel and then they get published to the web. So to publish a query from within Excel, we open the query builder using the table formula that we created before, click on the filters label and it will have a drop-down menu. Select Publisher from this menu. This will open Publisher in front of the query builder. In the bottom right-hand corner of the Publisher window, click on the New button and it will display the Publish Query dialog. Publishing an existing query from within the query builder has the simple advantage that the query template gets copied straight into the new published query. It even generates a unique code and copies the table name into the title. Without doing anything else, let us just save this new published query by selecting the OK button. The Publish Query dialog will close, and the Publisher window should now have this new query at the top of the list. To view this published query in the web, we will need to open the Sharperlight web service in a browser. We want to access the list page of published queries. The list page will return a table of all the available published queries currently hosted in Publisher and enabled for public listing. You should be able to see the published query that we just created and saved into Publisher. To view the query, click on the relevant code and it will open the query in another browser tab. When we open the query, the top of the browser window has a set of prompts equivalent to the filters that have been defined in the published query. To view the query, select the Submit button and the available filter values will be used to generate a table. We are going to refine the look and feel of the published query deployed in the previous step. Instead of using Publisher from the query builder in Excel, we're going to run Publisher on its own, using the Publisher shortcut from the Start menu, All Programs, Sharperlight folder. After opening Publisher, we double-click on the query we created and it will open the query definition in the Publish Query dialog. We start by changing the code from the generated number to something a bit more meaningful. Then we type into the group the letters AAA and update the title to Accounts by Current Month and Year to Date. It is also a good idea to update the author name and the version number so other people have some idea of the status and who is working on the query. Moving from the General tab to the Report tab, enable the Stack Filters tick box in the center at the top. This will change how filters are displayed in the prompt bar in the browser. Stacking will position the filters one on top of the other. There are also quite a few filters and they may not be relevant in all circumstances, and they add to the visual clutter of the prompt bar. To hide some filters, use the Edit Query button and it'll open the query builder with the stored query template. To hide the company ID and account ID filters, we right-hand click on their filter rows and select Hide from the menu. This will grey out the filter description to indicate that they are now hidden filters. You may have noticed that we have the period number filter in twice because the first filter applies to the overall query, whilst the second period number filter applies to the current month filtered column. We can pass the filter to value from the first period number by referencing its filter name in the second filter. To the right of the second period number filter from and to values, there is a downward pointing arrow. Click on the arrow and it will display a list of all the available filter names. We want to use the second period number filter name in both the from and the to filter values. Referencing this filter means it does not need to be updated separately, and thus it can be hidden just like the company ID and account ID filters. On the Table tab, we change the page size to 10 rows and then use the OK button to save these changes to the General, Report and Table tabs. If we now refresh the list page in the web browser, The previous query will have disappeared and it will have been replaced with a row that has an AAA group and the new code. To open the updated table, click on its code in the list page and it will be opened in another browser tab. Notice the change in how the filters are stacked, and some of the filters are now hidden. Also, the table is now paged with 10 rows on each page. We could make more changes to this published query, but instead let us create a duplicate copy of this query. To clone a published query in Publisher, select the source query in the Publisher list pane and use the right-hand click menu to clone the query. The resulting clone will have the same query code, but with a 2 appended to the end. Double-click on the cloned published query in the Publisher list pane, and this will open the Publish Query dialog. Then rename the query code so it has chart at the end, and open the underlying query template using the Edit Query button. With the Query Builder open, we delete the amount by factor expression and the account ID from the output pane. This is just to simplify the chart. Accept these changes by selecting the OK button to close the Query Builder. On the Chart tab, we change the chart type to column stacked, and on the Report tab, we change the default type to chart. Accept these changes by using the OK button. In our web browser, we refresh the list page and use the code hyperlink for the account month year-to-date chart to open the query. It will chart the result set because the default type on the Report tab is set to chart. We return to the browser tab that has the old account by month table. We could just edit the department from and to range, but we're going to use the filter lookup. Click on the button with the 2 dots to the right of the to department value, and it'll display a lookup list of available values equivalent to what the lookup in the Query Builder would display. The lookup will page the records if there are lots of them, and you can navigate through the pages by using the page controls. Double-click on the 600 Research and Development department code, and the 600 will be copied into the filter for the department. Use the Submit button to extract the table, and use the upwards facing arrow in the far right-hand corner of the prompts bar to hide the prompts. With the prompts bar hidden, we increase the number of rows on each table page to 20. See how the table page size resizes automatically. Right-hand click on any of the table rows and the table menu will appear. From the table menu, we're going to use the chart submenu to chart the table. Select bar from the chart submenu and the table data will be charted in a new browser tab. To hide some of the data series, click on the Legend color palette and it will disable the legend entry and refresh the chart without the disabled series. From the Sharperlight web service index page, we select the View Dashboard Pages. The Dashboard Pages service address is a simple interface for adding, removing, exporting, and importing dashboard pages. If you're dealing with lots of pages, then you can filter the dashboards using the group, code, title, and author in the prompt bar. We're going to create a dashboard page and then use the 2 published queries from the previous section to populate its tiles. We click on the New button and then select OK to create a new page. A new dashboard will be created and it'll be generated with a default code. The new dashboard will be opened in a new browser tab and it'll be opened in edit mode with the edit page properties displayed. The Edit Page Properties window controls the overall details for the dashboard page. We change the code to Account Demo and update the title to Sample Accounting Demo Dashboard. Then we click on the Tile tab to access the Edit Tile Properties window. We change the tile title to Accounts Table and use the lookup button next to the content URL address to display a full list of web content from Publisher. The Content Lookup dialog displays all the published queries available in Publisher, and it provides a simple navigation pane to select a particular rendering style. We navigate to the Account by Month Year-to-Date query and select the table item below the Without Prompts folder. The shortened web address of the table will be copied into the content URL. To accept these changes, click on the Save button at the bottom of either the page or tile properties. The edit windows will disappear and the dashboard page will be loaded into the same browser tab. The initial tile size is probably too small for the content, so hover the cursor over the right-hand side bottom corner border and drag the border out until all the content is visible. If you refresh the page, it'll revert back to the original size. So we need to save this change. Hover the cursor over the tile title bar and you'll see three icons in the right-hand corner. The cog icon on the left will open the tile properties window. Select Save and the resizing will be permanent. You'll probably notice that the Accounts by Current Month table takes up quite a bit of space. Often with dashboard tiles, special effort is made to condense the information and reduce the visual clutter because the browser pane is a finite resource. Click on the cog icon again and we'll change the content URL to use the other published query that we cloned for the chart. Instead of using the content lookup button, we're going to manually edit the URL address by changing the existing code to have chart at the end. Select Save to accept these changes and see how the table has changed. We also want to add the chart to the same dashboard page. Open the tile properties and use the New Tile button to create a new tile. Change the title to Accounts Chart and use the Content Lookup button to select the line stacked style below the Charts folder for the Account by Month chart published query. We use the Save button to accept these changes, and we should now have two tiles on the same dashboard page. Depending on the size of the browser window, it might have positioned the chart tile below or alongside the table tile. We can reposition the tile by dragging the tile title to the preferred location, and it can be resized like before. Tiles do not have to have the same size and shape. You can tinker with the positioning and sizing to allow optimum information, but using the least space. Once a dashboard page is created, it has its own unique web address from the Sharperlight service, so it can be hyperlinked and bookmarked for future use. In summary, the Sharperlight formulas in Microsoft Excel use the same query builder interface, and they create intelligent formulas that link back to a query template. The same queries can be published to the web by saving them into Publisher, and the web content can be accessed directly and enclosed in a dashboard tile.